Now it's time for Perspective on the programme for you today, and it's all about changing hearts and minds. At the vision of the International Lesbian, Gay, Bisexual, Trans and Intersex Association. They aim to fight to ensure, as they put it, for a world where dignity, freedoms and full enjoyment of human rights are protected regardless of their sexual orientation. Well, with me now is their Programmes Director for Europe, Björn van Roozendaal, who spent much of his working life working for organisations promoting the rights of LGBTI people. He joins us now from Brussels. Thanks very much for being with us on the programme. First of all, just explain to us why this cause is so important for you.
But I think that is pretty simple. That is because there are so many LGBTI people in every city, in every country, in the region. And in particular in this time, I think, where we see growing polarization, backlash on human rights very broadly, it is very important that the events of human rights is put as a priority in policy, but also, as you said, in changing hearts and minds.
We've come quite a long way, haven't we? I mean, there's two stories just in the last 24 hours that I'd quite like to get your reaction to. Firstly, I know it's out of your region, but in Botswana, the ruling there in favour of decriminalising homosexuality. I mean, the judge saying there's nothing reasonable about discriminating and the provisions of a Victorian era should be set aside.
And which is fantastic, which follows the decriminalization that happened in India also very recently. I think that is great progress. It's very necessary. And it's indeed kind of pointing to a very double picture that we see at the moment, with on the one side countries taking away discriminatory laws, laws that criminalize our lives, and on the other side some countries rolling back in time.
Yeah, well, Kenya was one of them, wasn't it, saying that actually bans should stay in place?
Kenya was indeed an example where a similar campaign trying to lead to decriminalization was not successful. I think that when you look at the verdicts both in India and Botswana, they're very powerful. They indeed speak to the dignity that every human being should have. But obviously, some countries are not ready to take that step, and that has a lot to do with changing hearts and minds. We always say changing laws and policies is one thing to do, and a very important thing to do, because it creates space for people in society. But if society is not ready for that, then often the argument, very wrongly I believe, but that politicians hold, is that hearts and minds first need to be changed. So I think that when you look at the work of much of the LGBTI movement, how that has kind of changed in the past couple of years, is that we've started to work a lot more on changing hearts and minds, next to kind of the advocacy work through which we try to change laws and policies. But the changing hearts and minds has really become at the core of our agendas for that very reason, I believe.
And the second story we've been reporting here on France 24, Germany, this one is a ban is being considered there on so-called conversion therapies. I mean, the country's health minister saying homosexuality is not an illness, therefore there's no need for therapy.
Yeah. And rightly so. We've, I think, for a long time been able to look at the results of conversion therapies and the mental health issues that these conversion therapies actually cause. Are very significant. Also, when we look at the reality of young people, LGBTI young people, in many places around the world, I think that there is reason to ban these therapies globally. In Europe, we've started to look at the issue of homelessness, something that, for instance, in the UK and the US has been happening for a long time. And the numbers that we're getting from research are very concerning. LGBTI communities in the UK and the US are amongst the largest group of homeless young people. And the reason for that is because they're not welcome home anymore. So I think that is partially fed by policies that allow for conversion therapies, or the lack of policies that protect young people from conversion therapies, and coming from the belief that one's identity can be changed. Well, if there's one thing that we've really seen over the past and learned over the past couple of decades, is that is an absolute lie, and a very dangerous lie, leading to severe mental health issues amongst young people.
How do you deal then with, I mean, inevitably, of course, you come across prejudice. It's bound to happen. How do you deal with that?
Well, I think looking at countries like Turkey and Russia, where homosexuality has increasingly been taken up by somewhat totalitarian leaders to basically distance themselves from what they call Western ideologies. This is a very hard thing to do. That is very obvious. But I think at the core of it, what we need to do is to stay very humane in our approach, to listen to people, to listen to the concerns that people have, to address those concerns, and to make sure that we go into those communities to talk to people. Phobia, when you look at the word phobia in itself, it's a fear of the unknown. So as long as we don't manage to make sure that we are known to people, that lesbian, bisexual, trans, intersex and transgender people are known to people around them, then we will never kind of take that fear away. So I think that this is where the human work
presumably it's up to governments as well. I mean, I'm just thinking Mike Pence, even the vice president in the US, has obviously made some strong, what some would call anti-gay comments. I mean, it's very difficult, isn't it, if you've got a government which is not fully supporting what your theories and ideas are?
It is hard, but I don't think that we should be taken back by a couple of conservative figures like Mike Pence that hold strong places in government. They are a minority, and that's perhaps not the minority that we should focus on in terms of winning hearts and minds. The majority of the people, I believe, is ready to stand up for their neighbors, for their friends, for their families, and that is also what research has shown over the past couple of years, is that the majority of the people don't hold such a radical views. Unfortunately, now at the moment we live in a time where a couple of important people in government with strong views against LGBTI issues, often to mark, I think, a wider liberal agenda, have a lot to say. But I think that we should really understand them for what they are, and that is a minority, a small group of people that does not represent the majority of citizens in their views to LGBTI human rights issues.
Björn van Roozendaal, thanks very much for joining us today on the programme, joining us there live from Brussels. Thanks very much for being with us on the programme. Let's remind you the headlines on the programme then. The reading in Hong Kong of the bill to allow extraditions to China delayed until a later date. The authorities there backing down as thousands of protesters face off with riot police outside the legislature there. And the trial of 12 Catalan separatist leaders over their role in the region's failed 2017 independence bid due to wrap up later today after 4 months of hearings.